Now, time for this. Phoebe Plummer, the Just Stop Oil protester, who you may remember came on this programme a few weeks ago and also threw soup over Van Gogh's sunflowers, has been arrested for breaking her bail conditions, which prohibited protesting on any roads. Ms Plummer was dramatically arrested after taking part in a slow march yesterday morning. Officers politely told the activist she would have to leave her coffee and could not wait for her hash browns. Most unfortunate. Ms Plummer told friends filming that her arrest was completely draconian overreach of power. On the subject of Just Stop Oil, in the past decade, the Labour Party has received roughly £1.5 million from Dale Vince, who also funds, lo and behold, the Just Stop Oil campaign group. The Shadow Cabinet Minister has contended that he's a perfectly legitimate person to take money from. If he wishes to give money to other causes, that's up to him. But it can hardly be said that he affects our views as a Labour Party on Just Stop Oil. Sounds most improbable. Never mind. However, the Prime Minister has accused the opposition of leading us into an energy surrender, claiming Starmer is putting ideology before energy security with plans to block new oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. But I'm very pleased to be joined now by Just Stop Oil spokesman Dr. Patrick Hart. Dr. Hart, Phoebe very kindly came on this programme a few weeks ago. What is her situation at the moment? She's been arrested for breaking bail conditions, but I assume she's not locked up.
Hi, Jacob. Yeah, I believe she's been released without charge, from what I've heard.
Well, will you wish her well from me, and so I hope she comes back on this programme sometime. She was a great and feisty contributor. But
well, that's very kind of you.
Don't you think that you ought to stick to the law and allow people to get on with their daily business? That I can see you protesting from the Houses of Parliament, and there are never very many of you. If it were a protest of thousands disrupting the traffic's one thing, but when it's about a dozen, don't you think it's disproportionate and rather selfish?
OK, there's a couple of issues with this. So you say there's never very many of us. Throughout history, there have been protest movements. It's always a minority of people who do it. That's just the way it goes. So it really is nothing unusual. And I mean, you said to me, don't I think I should stick to the law? Clearly not. I'm here from Just Stop Oil. As you said in the introduction, I'm a doctor. I've been an absolutely law-abiding citizen my entire life. I've never been in trouble. I've not even had a parking ticket until this stage of my life. And I've thought long and hard about what I'm doing. And I would ask you and your viewers, why would I choose to break the law in this way? What is it that I've acknowledged about the climate crisis that makes me choose to break the law?
Well, I'd put it to you another way. Why don't you stand for election? Because if your arguments are so strong, you will be able to win elections by putting them to the British people.
Well, it's lovely of you to think that I can work as a doctor and an activist and then also run as an MP as well. I've only got so many hours in the day. But I think there's a fundamental flaw with what you're saying there. You're assuming a level playing field. And the problem we've seen is actually we know for decades the fossil fuel industry and politicians who have been funded by them have systematically lied to us. And we haven't had a platform for the truth, which is that we're in a climate crisis, that people are dying now and will die ever more in the future. And the only way to bring this to attention is to take the kind of action we've seen that Just Stop Oil have been taking, disruptive action. And there are actually politicians out there who can't do what they want to do because they're up against this barrage of lies and misinformation, which has been funded by millions and millions of pounds of fossil fuel money. So actually, this activism is essential if we're to create that change, if we're going to allow politicians to do their job.
But a lot of money has been going to the Labour Party from a funder of Just Stop Oil. They've got £1.5 million. The Green Party is well funded, is active, stands in every parliamentary constituency in the kingdom and only wins one seat. I'm just surprised that you have such a distaste for democracy, that you think you can't win the argument at the ballot box, so you have to take direct action. And you talk about small protesters. The Iraq war protests had a couple of million people. The Countryside Alliance had 1 million people. That these marches have been enormous numbers, not the dozen or so that you managed to get out.
Okay, so we have had enormous numbers out for the type of marches that you've talked about. We saw Extinction Rebellion's big one with, I think the Met Police estimate about 90,000 people marching together.
Yeah, but
it didn't get very much coverage.
And then you're entitled to block the traffic. I think if you've got 90,000 people, that's fair enough. But it's when you've only got a dozen that you don't have the right to block traffic with very small numbers. Simply not proportionate.
So I'm not sure where you're making this up from. That's not the law as it stands. We have a democratic right to protest, and protest by its nature, if it's effective, is disruptive. So we do have a right to cause disruption, whatever number of us. I'm not sure why you feel you're entitled to come up with a cut-off of how many people there ought to be.
Well, because it's a question of proportionality to the inconvenience you cause to the vast bulk of the nation, that 90,000 people deserve to have a proper route for their march and so on and so forth, and traffic has to be redirected, and everybody accepts that. But just a few people carrying a banner, it's not surprising when you're blocking people getting to hospital, when you don't stand for election, that people think this is unreasonable, disproportionate and not democratic.
Right, so I've had enough of this. We're not blocking ambulances. That's absolute nonsense. Every time I hear one of these stories, it turns out to be false, and I'm not going to put up with that anymore. Secondly, yes, there are lots of people standing for election for green issues. They need the public discourse that will allow them to get their points across and allow people to realise this is a serious issue that needs their votes. And actually, we saw massive gains for the Greens at the last local elections, massive gains. So actually, this message is getting through, and it's thanks to disruptive protest that it's getting through. I'm going to say
Well, I hope you'll
now,
stick to standing in elections rather than disrupting people's daily lives. Thank you for coming on to have the discourse with us, which I am very and genuinely grateful for. Coming up, is Elon Musk able to read your mind? And should his company Neuralink be regulated? And Ofgem, well,